All right, all right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nonprofit Enthusiasts Live. I am so excited to have Miss Debbie Pedraza with us today, back again. Hey.
Hello, hello.
All right, so if you are here, don't forget to invite a friend to the Facebook group. You don't want to miss out as we kickstart this month's topic on measurement and evaluation. We are going to have a really good discussion to kind of kick that off. So please make sure that you tag your friends into the group. If you're catching this on replay, give us a hashtag replay in the chat box so that we know you are here and that you were able to catch up on the replay. And while we wait, let us know that you're here by dropping a hey, how you doing in the chat box. I see, hey, good morning, Michelle. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so excited for this conversation. But before we get started, I have to take a moment to thank our sponsor. Special thanks to this month's Nonprofit Enthusiast Live sponsor, Catalyst Event Coaching, that focuses on empowering nonprofits and small business through training to execute successful events. And we'll have Shamika joining us at the end of the month to talk a little bit more about Catalyst, along with this month's topic on measurement and evaluation. So let's go ahead and jump right into it.
All right.
Debbie, I love it when you're on. I'm so excited. I can't wait for us to dive into this topic of measurement and evaluation for nonprofit organizations. But before we get started, I know you've been on a few times and we also shared your bio. Do you mind just doing a very brief overview of yourself and your journey within nonprofit, and then we'll dive into this month's topic?
Absolutely. So without giving away my age, I've been working in educational fundraising and development since 1997. So I've worked in Massachusetts, in Maryland, and here in Florida. I'm currently the executive director of the Foundation for Orange County Public Schools. And, we focus on securing time, talent, and treasure for the district. We do everything from helping somebody who wants to connect with a single project at a single school, all the way up to everything that covers the whole district. So whether you want to volunteer, you want to provide skills or in kind, or you want to invest your dollars into the programs, we create the pathways to make that happen so that you can have the impact that you want to create within the educational space. And we believe very strongly that it's important to invest in our children today to strengthen our entire community tomorrow. Children are our most precious resource, and the potential that a child has is not determined by his or her zip code. It can definitely mask it if we're not careful, but that's why education is so important. It is the pathway. So that's, I have a strong passion for that. And I have a strong passion for nonprofit work. I love doing these sessions with you and helping make sure that other nonprofits are gaining insight from each other. The professional association I belong to is CASE, which is the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education. But they tell you when you're a newcomer to development that it actually means copy and steal everything. So it's so rare that we overlap on our audiences. So if it's working in one space, it can probably be modified to work in another space. So it's important to share. And that's why I love doing these sessions with you.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. Copy and steal everything. I love it. And thank you so much for everything that you do over at the foundation. All right, so this month's topic is some of us in the nonprofit's favorite topic and some least favorite topic, which is measurement and evaluation. Can you talk a little bit about what is, in your words, like performance measurement, and what is evaluation before we kind of dive a little deeper into what this looks like for nonprofits?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, you have to remember that idea about impact, that, what we do as nonprofits, it's not about our needs, it's about relationships and about our donors wanting to have impact and create impact. So evaluation and measurement is so important to demonstrate that impact has occurred. You need to be able to show that your programs and your work are making a difference in the way that you intended. Now, I will say, Sometimes you find it's not doing what you expected when you measure and evaluate. That is useful too, because you can't change something that's going wrong if you don't know about it. So making sure that you are measuring the right elements, we're going to talk about that. We'll go deeper into that, and understanding the difference between outputs and outcomes. Outputs are your activities and your services that you're providing every day. And you do need to measure those. Usually that tends to be counting. How many people did we feed? How many children did we tutor in reading? How many tutors did we bring in? It's counting. But outcomes have to do with comparing. How has this changed? What change have we created? Have those kids' reading scores improved from the beginning of the year to the end? Where's the impact and change? And those outcomes are really what's important. So if you're a soup kitchen and you're saying, well, we feed 3,000 people a month in our community, that's an output, that's important. But the funders are going to want to know, well, has hunger been reduced in your community? That's the impact or the change they're looking for. So outputs are counting activity, outcomes are measuring change. And that's what you want to be able to see. Are you turning the curve, making it better, reducing a problem, or improving an issue that needs to be addressed? So you got to think about it in those terms.
And I love how you broke that down because it made it really simple. Output, you're counting the activities. Outcome, how are you making a change? Because sometimes you get so lost in the long explanation for what it is, but ultimately it boils down to, outputs being your day-to-day activities, like you mentioned, and then the outcomes, what change are you making? So I love that you share that in a very simplistic form that can be implemented. Awesome.
And something that the nonprofits sometimes fall into is we're very proud of the work that we do, and we want people to know all those details. There's nothing wrong with that. What you have to avoid is making sure you're not creating a love letter to yourself. And we're wonderful because we're doing all of this. It's about the impact the donor is trying to invest in and working with you and through you to create that impact. So the outcomes are a lot more important than the outputs. Yeah.
Love it. And I would love, and I know you have some other areas to kind of talk about, but can you talk about, so sometimes you can get caught into measuring everything, and then it becomes an entire task in itself, trying to implement measurement and evaluation within your organization. What are some tips that you have for organizations like that? It's like, where do I start? What do I measure? How can I just narrow down? It's so much that I can zoom into.
Exactly. So here's a few guiding questions. These are best used at the beginning of a program, but it's okay. You could stop right now and ask yourself these questions about your organization and get yourself back on track. So the first thing to ask is, what will success look like? How will we know that our program is successful? What kinds of things are happening for those we're serving, for our community? What might that look like? And then the next question is, okay, if that's what success looks like, what can we measure about that? So let me give you a couple of examples within education. One of the simplest ways for us to look at impact in educational programs are the ABCs: attendance, behavior, and coursework. And what that means is a program is working if kids are coming to school because they can't learn if they're not there, if they are staying out of trouble or improving their behavior, so then they're in the classroom and learning effectively. And if their scores, whether those are classroom grades, state assessments, various scores that kids have that are recorded, if those are improving. So, a program like Read to Succeed, which is our tutoring program for kindergarten, first and second graders, we know it's working If they're already behind their classmates. So if they've gained more than a year's worth of growth on their coursework, if their behavior is improving, that they're getting fewer discipline issues, and they're showing up for school because they're excited to see that adult who's coming consistently for them every day or every week rather, then we know it's working. So what does success look like for your program? What kinds of things are happening for the people you're serving? And of those, what can you measure? There might be some things that you're like, well, we're doing senior services and we're making sure that seniors have more activities to do and they're more engaged in the community. That might be hard to measure. Happiness might be hard to measure, their engagement, but what could you measure? Does their attendance improve over time at the events? What are the patterns that you see that are going to show you that it's working? What is that end goal and your objective? Then you look at what you can measure, and what you can measure is sometimes going to depend on other partners. So this is something I do want to share, especially for anybody who's in the education space, especially K through 12. If you're working with children, gathering data from organizations that have that data already, there's a lot of issues around confidentiality and privacy. So you want to talk upfront with your partners about what they can and can't provide, because a lot of times that change is going to be a pattern that you're going to be able to see. It isn't going to be necessarily one by one by one by one. You don't necessarily need the individual data on one child. You might need aggregated data over a whole school or a grade. What's happening with that? It's much easier for the school district to provide aggregated data where it's groups than it is to provide you with individual student data, because it's very easy to fall into personally identifiable information. And PII, personally identifiable information, is a no-no. It's, you don't want to have to go there. You want to keep people's privacy in place. Both FERPA and HIPAA address those things. So just, big picture, can you tell what's happening by looking at the entire cohort of kids? And it's a good idea to think about what will be different. Okay, well, is there another group of people who aren't getting those services who you could look at and see the pattern, the change between them? I'll give you another example. It happens to be reading, but Orlando Magic is a great partner of ours, and they have started up with us something. It's a once a year event called Pick, Read, Enroll. We bring in all of the fourth grade students from about 38 Title I schools in the area, and we bring in the top 3 most improved readers who are now in 5th grade. Those 5th graders get to sit on the floor, they get to interact with the players, they get to play games with stuff. And the whole idea of the event is to inspire those 4th graders to read, do more with their reading before they get to their exams. And then what we do is we go back and look at how did their reading assessment scores change as a group for their schools from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And what we found after our first year of Pick, Read, Enroll is those schools as a group, they gained a 30% increase in their reading scores. Yeah. Now,
wow.
This is also about telling your story, measuring and evaluation. So you do have to be careful about not necessarily taking credit for the whole thing. Is it only Pick, Read, Enroll that across all those kids helped increase? No, it's not only Pick, Read, Enroll. There are other things, but it is an important part of the story that made that difference, because compared to other Title I 4th grade schools that did not get to go to Pick, Read, Enroll, these kids had a 30% increase in their reading scores, and that didn't happen in other fourth grade classes at Title I schools. So conditions being fairly similar, comparison is important, and pattern and shift is important. So you got to really think about it and have those conversations. What will success look like? What can you measure? And you don't have to measure everything. You want to measure the things that tie back to the impact that you're wanting to create and that your donors want to create. Now, what happens if you do your measuring and it's not working? Ruh-roh. That happens. I strongly recommend, if you start seeing that it's not going in the direction you wanted to, you need to pick up the phone or send an email or set a meeting as soon as possible with your funders and let them know, look, this here's what we're seeing. We're not seeing a change. And then you need to talk with them and also talk within your team about what are you going to do to change it? What kind of a shift? What are you learning from this? And how do you shift in a different direction? But that you have to start with transparent, open conversation. If you're noticing a problem, don't wait till the end of the program to share that. Share it as soon as you can. Funders do appreciate that. And many funders, especially individuals who are willing to invest in the work that you're doing, they do understand that you are, trying to solve a problem and that every solution is going to work. But what can you take away from it? What did you learn? How will you change your practices to get to the right solutions? You're failing forward, basically. Failure is a huge part of learning. So, think of it as failing forward, but always include the partner as a true partner in the conversation and let them know what's going on. And if you're measuring and evaluating along the way, it makes it much easier to have those conversations. You have something to share with them, including the great things you're seeing too. So don't wait for your reports to plug this in. Let them know what you're seeing along the way.
I love that you said that, because sometimes you can get caught into continuously, you see you're measuring, but it's not going the way that you intended it, or you're not meeting that, outcome expectations of the grant that you're working with. And instead of having that open, transparent conversation, continuing to report that until the funder call, and say, hey, you're not meeting. So I love that you're saying, be upfront, be proactive, meet with your funder and kind of say, this is what we're seeing. And you'll probably by then know why you think you're seeing that. And then kind of have some solutions and kind of talk it through with your funder. I love that you share that. And so I put, if it's broken, fix it in the chat box.
If it's broken, fix it. But if it's broken, tell somebody. And,
right. Yes.
Your funders are partners. They're there to help you solve a problem and create impact. They want you to succeed, and they want to be a part of things. So include them. It is, and bottom line, it's about those relationships, right? And if it's they're a friend, you're going to have an open, transparent conversation with them.
So how can an organization balance when it comes to, let's say, one program funded by one funder has this outcome expectation, therefore you're doing all of this measurement behind that. Then there's another funder that also have their own expectation, but that may not be the same. And then you find yourself back in that place of just kind of tracking and spend a lot of time in this area. What recommendations would you have for that?
Well, I would definitely, if you haven't started out by saying what success is going to look like and what you're going to measure, then have that conversation, have it internally first, and really look at, the outcome expectations and there are times when funders ask you to measure things that aren't going to show you impact or change. And again, an open conversation about, here's what we can measure, here's what we think is going to work. Will this meet your needs? I've experienced that many times with funders, and where I've had to say, okay, well, I know what you're thinking will work is this. Here's what I know I can measure. And here's what I know I can show you. Will this meet your needs? And, you know, more often than not, if you've got it very clean about this is what I know, this is what success is going to look like, and here's what we know we can measure, their funders tend to be fairly flexible about that. But again, you gotta have the conversation. So have you thought about what you really can measure? Are they asking you to measure things that you can deliver on? And I'll be honest, you do not earn your stripes in this field until you said no to funding. It's not easy, but it happens. There are times when what a funder is going to ask you to do is beyond what you're capable of providing. So you just, you know, you might have to say no. One of the best pieces of advice, this came from Mike Morseberger when he was here at the UCF Foundation. He will say, you know, beware of gifts that eat. That are going to eat up your time, eat up your resources, and aren't necessarily going to create the impact that you want. Now, some of that comes from things like an auction item that's like a racehorse that you're going to have to, you know, shelter and stable and feed and vet and all that stuff. But it's here too, when funders are asking for more than what you're capable of doing. And you're going to spend all your time measuring and none of your time doing the program. You really have to think about and have an open conversation with them about what you can do, and would they be willing to shift on what they will accept as measurement to show that you've gotten to the objective together. So yeah, that's a challenging situation.
I love that. Beware of gifts that eat. That is really good, and a really good way to kind of process. Should we accept this or should we not?
Yeah. I've had situations where we've had to say, you know what, thank you, and we're gonna look elsewhere. So it's not a fun conversation. But I've also had great situations where donors have shifted what they're willing to fund, what they're willing to accept, because they didn't know how challenging it would be. They're not intending to make it hard for you. And they may or may not know your field. So you just have to be upfront. This is what we can do. Yep.
Love it. Awesome. I'm gonna go over to the chat box really quick. Hi, Brenda. Thank you for tuning in. And if you all have questions, please drop them in the chat, and then we're going to get ready to wrap up in a few. So please drop any questions that you have in the chat. Hi, Cindy. Thank you so much for tuning in. You all make sure you check out Cindy at acesmatter.org. We had an event last night. Thank you for tuning in, Cindy. All right. So before we head out, is there anything that you would like to cover, or any like last, you gave a lot of really good tips, and we dropped them in the chat box. Beware of the gifts that eat. Your funders are your partner as well. Be transparent with your funders, looking at how does what you measure tie back to your impact. Benefits, there's benefits at looking at the aggregated data based off of the examples that you gave, using measurement and evaluation to help tell your story and how you can kind of frame that. There's so much different things that you've shared, the ABCs, looking at attendance, behavior, coursework, anything else that you would like to share. And Chanel said, thank you for the information. Anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would say be willing to look pretty far afield for patterns. Let me give you an example of something. We have worked for a number of years with the Holocaust Center on their Upstanders program, which is wonderful. It is a bullying prevention program, and it's been in the middle schools in the city of Orlando for many years. And we were looking to see what the impact was. And we found that when you looked from at just one school, it was hard to see what the impact was. And we had to go out to that comparative information. When we looked at all of the schools over a period of 5 years, what we found was the students who had the upstanders program were 2/3 less likely to have discipline issues compared to the kids who did not have the program. But if we hadn't looked across all the schools and across multiple years, we wouldn't have seen it. So don't get too microscopic and looking for your impact. You might need to, it might take a few years. You might need to compare, one group to another, one group who's getting the services versus those who are not. And keep that data, track it along, because patterns will emerge out of nowhere. All of a sudden, it will be apparent to you. So don't be nervous if you're like, "No, I'm not seeing this." You have to make sure you're looking for the right things and comparing along the way. That's why we know, for example, with Read to Succeed, that our kiddos who are in the program are getting more than a year's worth of growth compared to kids who are not in the program. They're catching up, and that's what we want. We want them to be on in the same space with their peers. They don't need to go above them. So what does success look like in your program? How will you know that your program is working? What things are going to be going on in and around those you're serving? And hey, I hope we all manage to work ourselves right out of a job, because wouldn't that be lovely if we're able to create enough change? Things are working on their own. So but yeah, just don't get too microscopic. Be willing to look across multiple timeframes and multiple groups to see what your impact is.
Love it.
Okay.
Thank you so much. It's always great to have you on. I'm excited. So you all make sure Debbie's going to be back with us in June for our topic that month. Is going to be process and systems. So the conversation is going to continue. Thank you so much, Debbie, for hanging out with us this morning.
Absolutely. Is that July or June?
Oh, did I say June? July.
July.
Yep,
Okay.
yep, July. Sorry,
Okay,
in July. So Debbie will be back with us. So please make sure that you tune in for that. Thank you so much for coming back on. And other than that, I'm just going to close out today once again by thanking our sponsor, really Catalyst Event Coaching, that focuses on empowering nonprofits and small businesses through training to execute successful events. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.